Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The sky above Serapis was a sickly green, the remnants of a planet long forgotten by time, its glory buried under layers of dust and decaying structures. The ancient empire that once ruled here was nothing more than a distant echo, its achievements and culture reduced to ruins. For Dr. Evelyn Marks, an archaeologist from Earth, this desolation was a treasure trove. Every crumbling building, every cracked obelisk was a piece of the puzzle that could unlock the secrets of an empire lost to history. She just didn't realize that some secrets should remain buried. Her footsteps echoed through the hollow corridors of the ancient temple. The air was thick, stale from millennia of abandonment, yet there was something else, something unsettling that clung to the atmosphere. As she scanned the walls, her flashlight revealed intricate carvings. The figures etched into the stone seemed to writhe in the dim light, depicting scenes of a once flourishing civilization. Among them were ominous creatures, towering figures that loomed over the empire's citizens. "Jonah, come take a look at this," Evelyn called out, her voice muffled by the silence. Jonah Reeves, her assistant and the team's data analyst, appeared at her side. He was younger, less seasoned, but sharp. His dark eyes flicked from the carvings to the dusty floor, noticing the strange patterns beneath their feet. "What do you make of it?" she asked, brushing her fingertips against the stone. The figures depicted looked monstrous, half organic, half mechanical. It was as if the very essence of life had been twisted into something unnatural. Jonah squinted, taking out his portable scanner. "I'm not sure. Could be ceremonial, maybe something to do with their religious beliefs." Evelyn frowned, her mind churning. She had spent years studying the remnants of this empire, but nothing in the historical record had prepared her for what she saw. These creatures, these destroyers, were different. There was something sinister about them. Something that didn't belong in the narrative of a once glorious civilization. "I don't think this was a religious figure," she said softly. "This was something else." Before Jonah could respond, a static buzz erupted from their comms, breaking the eerie silence. "Dr. Marks, you need to come back to the base camp," came the voice of Captain Harris, their security lead. "We've picked up a signal." Something unusual. Evelyn exchanged a glance with Jonah, her pulse quickening. They had been on this mission for weeks, uncovering remnants of the empire but finding little that could explain its abrupt downfall. A signal could mean anything: a surviving technology, or worse, something alive. "We'll be right there," Evelyn replied, motioning for Jonah to follow her out of the temple. As they made their way through the decaying corridors, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The walls seemed to close in on them, the oppressive silence making every footstep feel like a drumbeat. Jonah walked beside her, fidgeting with his scanner, but she could see the tension in his face. He felt it too, the sense that they had stirred something long forgotten. When they reached the base camp, a collection of tents and scientific equipment nestled at the edge of the temple ruins, Captain Harris was already waiting for them. A no-nonsense military man, Harris had seen his share of strange things in the galaxy, but even he looked uneasy. "What's the signal?" Evelyn asked. Harris nodded toward the comm station. "It's coming from deep within the ruins. Some kind of automated beacon. We thought this place was dead, but now a broken bar. It's like something woke up." Evelyn stared at the monitor, her mind racing. Ancient empires didn't leave beacons running for millennia unless they were warning something or someone. She turned to Jonah. "Can you isolate it? Pinpoint the location?" Jonah nodded, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Give me a minute." As the data streamed across the screen, Evelyn's heart pounded. Something about this felt wrong. Deeply wrong. She had read enough history to know that some ruins were better left untouched. Empires that fell rarely did so peacefully, and the alien civilization that once dominated Serapis had vanished with terrifying suddenness. "There," Jonah said, pointing at the screen. "It's coming from a chamber about a mile east of here, beneath the ruins of what looks like a fortress." "A fortress?" Harris repeated, his brows furrowing. This place was a capital city, not a military outpost. Evelyn shook her head, her thoughts churning. We need to go. There might be answers there. Harris hesitated, his hand resting on the rifle slung across his chest. Dr. Marks, are you sure that's a good idea? We don't know what triggered that signal, and we're not equipped to handle anything a broken bar dangerous. Evelyn knew the risks, but the lure of uncovering the truth was too great. We came here for answers, Captain. We can't stop now. Harris sighed, nodding reluctantly. All right, but we go in fully armed. The journey to the fortress was treacherous, the ruins more labyrinthine as they approached the eastern edge of the city. The wind howled through broken spires and jagged rock formations, carrying with it the distant echoes of the Empire's final days. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far older, far deadlier than they had anticipated. When they reached the entrance to the fortress, it was clear that time had not been kind to the structure. Massive stone doors, covered in centuries of dust and debris, loomed before them. Carvings similar to those in the temple adorned the entrance, depicting the same monstrous figure as the destroyers, as the data logs had referred to them. Jonah worked to unlock the sealed entrance, his fingers trembling slightly. It's ancient, but the locking mechanism is still operational. This fortress must have been important to keep this intact. With a groan, the massive doors slid open, revealing a dark, gaping void beyond. The air inside was cold, a biting chill that felt unnatural, even for a planet long abandoned. Their flashlights pierced the darkness, illuminating a narrow corridor leading deeper into the fortress. As they ventured inside, the walls grew tighter, and the air thicker. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of their footsteps and the occasional hum of distant machinery. Something was alive in this place, something old, something waiting. Evelyn's heart raced as they descended deeper into the fortress, the walls around them shifting from stone to sleek, ancient metal. The deeper they went, the more the structure resembled a containment facility rather than a fortress. Dr. Marks, take a look at this, Jonah called out, his voice barely above a whisper. Ahead of them, at the end of the corridor, stood a massive containment chamber. It was sealed, the walls covered in strange alien script. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and even Harris, who had faced death countless times, looked uneasy. This is it, Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. This is what they were trying to keep hidden. Without warning, the chamber's lights flickered to life, casting an eerie glow over the room. Alarms began to blare, the sound reverberating through the fortress. Something had been triggered, something ancient, something dangerous. Fall back, Harris shouted, raising his weapon as the containment door began to open. But it was too late. The creature that emerged from the chamber was like nothing they had ever seen, a hulking, grotesque, a monstrous fusion of alien biology and mechanical technology. Its body was covered in jagged, metal-like armor, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural, hungry light. It was a destroyer, one of the Empire's greatest weapons, now awakened and ready to hunt. Before they could react, the creature lunged, moving with terrifying speed. It ripped through one of the security officers, its claws slicing through armor and flesh with ease. Blood sprayed across the walls, the air thick with the scent of death. Run! Evelyn screamed, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the alarms. They fled, their footsteps echoing through the corridors as the destroyer pursued them with relentless determination. It was faster, stronger, and far more intelligent than they could have ever imagined. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly as they ran, the sound of their labored breathing mingling with the relentless pounding of the destroyer's footsteps behind them. Evelyn's heart was racing, every instinct screaming at her to get out, to find safety. But there was no safety here. They had awakened something that had been slumbering for millennia, and now wanted them dead. Harris led the way, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands. Jonah was right behind Evelyn, his breath ragged as they darted around a corner and into a wider hall. The moment they burst through the door, Harris slammed it shut, his hands shaking as he jammed the locking mechanism. That thing, a broken bar, it's unstoppable, Jonah gasped, doubling over as he tried to catch his breath. Evelyn glanced back at the door, the heavy thudding of the destroyer growing louder. It was only a matter of time before it broke through. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "We have to find another way out." Harris nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. "We need to head back to the ship. Get to high ground. Maybe we can." Before he could finish, the door buckled. Metal screeched, and the entire frame bent inward as the destroyer's massive claws punched through. It was coming for them. "Fast. Move!" Harris barked, shoving Jonah forward as they bolted down the hall. Evelyn's mind raced as they ran. The creature, they called it a destroyer, but it was more than just a mindless killing machine. It had intelligence. It was hunting them, stalking them, learning from every encounter. And if the logs were right, this was only the beginning. There were more. They sprinted through the labyrinth of corridors, the sounds of destruction growing fainter behind them. But Evelyn knew it wouldn't last. The fortress was massive, but it wasn't a sanctuary. The destroyer would find them again. It was only a matter of time. Ahead, the corridor opened up into a massive chamber. Ancient consoles lined the walls, each one flickering weakly with power. The room was dominated by a large, central terminal, its interface covered in the strange alien script they had seen throughout the ruins. "This must be the control center," Jonah muttered, his voice barely a whisper as he looked around. Evelyn approached the terminal, her fingers trembling as she wiped the dust from its surface. The alien script was familiar now. After hours of poring over the logs and records they had recovered, she understood enough to know that this terminal controlled the containment system. It was designed to keep the destroyers locked away. But something had gone wrong. The failsafe had failed. "We need to find a way to shut it down," Evelyn said, her voice tight with urgency. "There has to be a way to stop it." Jonah moved to the nearest console, his hands flying over the controls as he tried to access the system. "It's still operational," a broken bar barely. "But I think I can." His voice cut off as the ground shook beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the walls seemed to tremble as if the entire fortress were groaning under the strain of the ancient technology. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. The destroyer was close. "Jonah, we don't have time," Harris growled, his eyes darting toward the door. "I'm working as fast as I can," Jonah snapped, his hands shaking as he continued typing. The console flickered, and then a stream of data began scrolling across the screen. "Got it. There's a failsafe system. It's supposed to deactivate the destroyers." "Do it," Evelyn urged, her eyes fixed on the door. Jonah's fingers moved faster, navigating the ancient interface with desperate precision. Finally, with a triumphant click, he activated the sequence. The room hummed with energy, and for a moment, Evelyn allowed herself to hope. But then the system flickered and died. "No, no, no!" Jonah cried, slamming his fist against the console. "It's not working. The power's too low. The system's failing." A low growl echoed from the corridor, and Evelyn's blood ran cold. The destroyer had found them. Harris raised his rifle, his face grim. "We need to move now." They bolted from the control room, their footsteps echoing through the ancient halls as they raced against time. The fortress seemed to shift around them, the walls twisting in the dim light as if the structure itself was alive, watching them. Evelyn's breath came in ragged gasps as they ran, her mind spinning with the weight of their situation. The failsafe had failed. There was no way to deactivate the destroyers, no way to stop them from hunting. And worse, she realized, there was more than one. "This can't be happening," Jonah whispered, his voice filled with dread. "We're trapped." "We're not trapped," Harris growled. "We just need to get back to the ship." Evelyn wasn't sure if that was even possible anymore. The fortress was vast, and the path they had taken had twisted and turned so many times she wasn't sure they could find their way back. But there was no other choice. They had to try. The sound of the destroyer grew louder, closer. Its heavy footsteps thudded against the stone floors, relentless in its pursuit. Evelyn glanced over her shoulder, her heart pounding as she saw the shadow of the creature rounding the corner behind them. It was faster than before, more determined. It had learned, faster. Harris shouted, his voice thick with panic. They rounded another corner, the narrow passageways of the fortress disorienting them with every turn. Evelyn could barely see in front of her, the dim light from her flashlight flickering as they ran. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed for air, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Ahead, a light appeared at the end of the corridor. It was faint, but it was their only hope. The exit. We're almost there, Jonah cried, his voice filled with desperate relief. But as they neared the exit, the ground shook again, and a deafening roar filled the air. The destroyer lunged from the shadows, its massive claws swiping through the air as it barreled toward them. Harris turned, his rifle blazing with rapid gunfire. The bullets tore into the creature, but it barely slowed. It was unstoppable, a force of nature that couldn't be contained. Evelyn's heart sank as she watched Harris stand his ground, his face set with grim determination. He wasn't going to make it. Go! Harris shouted, his voice filled with fury as he unloaded his weapon into the advancing creature. Get out of here! Evelyn and Jonah didn't hesitate. They sprinted toward the exit, their hearts pounding in their chests as the sound of the destroyer's growl filled the air. Harris's gunfire echoed behind them, but it wasn't enough. They both knew it wasn't enough. The moment they burst through the exit and into the open air, the world seemed to blur around them. The planet's strange green sky stretched above them, casting an eerie glow over the desolate ruins. But they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Behind them, they heard Harris's final scream. Then silence. Evelyn's heart ached, but there was no time to mourn. She and Jonah ran through the ruins, their footsteps kicking up dust as they raced toward the distant silhouette of their ship. It was their only chance of survival, their only hope of escaping this nightmare. As they neared the ship, Jonah's breath hitched, and he stumbled, falling to his knees. I can't a broken bar. Evelyn grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. You can. We have to make it. The ground shook again, and they both turned to see the destroyer emerging from the ruins. It had followed them, relentless in its pursuit. Its glowing eyes locked onto them, and it let out a deafening roar, its body heaving with the effort of its hunt. We're not going to make it, Jonah whispered, his voice hollow. We will, Evelyn said, her voice firm, though fear gnawed at her insides. They reached the ship, the ramp already down. Evelyn shoved Jonah inside, her heart pounding as she turned to face the destroyer one last time. It was close, too close. She could see the madness in its eyes, the raw hunger for destruction. Without thinking, she slammed the ramp control, sealing the ship as the creature barreled toward them. The moment the door shut, she collapsed to the ground, her body shaking with exhaustion and fear. Jonah scrambled to the cockpit, his hands trembling as he activated the ship's engines. We need to get out of here. Now! The ship roared to life, lifting off the ground as the destroyer's claws scraped against the hull. But it was too late for the creature. As the ship ascended into the sky, Evelyn watched as the planet below grew smaller, the ruins fading into the distance. For now, they were safe. But the destroyer was still out there, and Evelyn knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning.